I have just found out that I do want to be. I'm 100% sure about becoming a physician. It took me up until this point. So the question you asked,
Congrats,
when did you?
I guess.
My point is not that you always have to ever be 100% sure. It's a continuum, right? You can be 20% sure, 30% sure, 40% sure. It'll grow over time. Coming away from that, what I've been able to grow is seeing that there's this whole other, side of New York City. That there's a whole other immigrant, or not even immigrant, minority. I don't even know how to use the right
communities
word.
of color.
There's so many communities of
color, everything
right
between,
that are facing their own struggles, that are facing their own narratives that are parallel to ours in many ways, but also we have so much to learn from their stories and vice versa. So I've recently had, and it wasn't easy, but I've had the kind of mentality and courage to call out my relatives, my mom, my uncle, on just some of the casual racism or casual stereotypes, discriminatory practices, or things that are just kind of said offhand, but really shape the way the younger, people in the room, the 7-8-year-olds, are going to grow up hearing this from their parents.
So moving to the Diallo case, tell us a little about that. It happened in the Soundview, the Bronx, in early '99, right when we were finishing high school.
Right. Yeah. You see, and I'll always remember that case because it's a big part of actually why I decided to go to law school. And that's because for those of you who aren't familiar, there's this individual, Amadou Diallo, who was an undocumented kid, about 23 years old. So I remember I was a senior in high school around then, so it was just a couple of years older than us. And there were 3 plainclothes police officers who came to him. They thought he fit a description, according to them, of a suspect. And he goes up to them and they tell him to raise his hands. But Mr. Diallo, who didn't know English, he started reaching in his back pocket for his wallet. And these 3 plainclothes police officers, so again, and I think the plainclothes is important because it's not as if you see someone they're an officer because they're in their uniform, but you see 3 folks who are coming up to him, slowly, kind of shouting things at him. So he starts to reach for his wallet to show his credentials, that he's allowed to be able to.
He was in front of his own house trying to just get inside after a meal.
Yeah, right.
And there was a witness account that shared that the police had not identified themselves. So there was a little conflict there whether they had even identified themselves in the first place, causing to more confusion. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then what these officers did is they shot at him not once, not twice, not 3, not 4, not 10, not 15, not 20, not 30, not 35. They shot at him 41 times.
Killing him.
41 times, right. Yes, definitely killing. I think 23 of the shots landed on it. And the short of it is, this happened in the Bronx, as you were mentioning. The officers were tried, but first the case was relocated upstate, I believe, to Albany. And even though the individuals who did the shooting, the individuals who were shot, the actual incident all took place in the Bronx, it was moved upstate.
A jury in Albany determining a case in the Bronx. That's
right, in an area that historically has a more of a quote unquote, law enforcement, pro law enforcement kind of background there. And sure enough, these officers were acquitted of all charges. And to me, this happened, again, my senior year in high school. And they started throwing around all these terms as to why he was why they were acquitted, such as these terms such as qualified immunity and what have you. And I didn't know any of that stuff. I was 17, but what I heard, it just, whatever it was, it just didn't sound like justice.
Nope.
And I know at that time, myself and a few other folks at Bronx, I know you had graduated by this point, but a few of us put together a student demonstration. We walked out of the school. And, the short of it is, we ended up being able to speak with a number of different local officials and, some people took pictures. But to me, it seemed like, it was more looking like a photo thing for folks. People wanted to say, oh, look at these kids who are doing, what have you. But there was no actual change that was happening. And to me, it always made me feel that, well, I mean, do you want to be someone who's just talking about some of these things that happen, or just, something you talk about at the dinner table or what have you? Or do you try to put yourself in a position to be able to do something about it?
In New York, we had 5 years ago, we had the death of Eric Garner. 5 to 6 years ago, who was a father.
I think it was 5 years ago, like last month.
It was 5 years ago, and he was selling loose cigarettes, allegedly. And in the police encounter, there was an illegal chokehold used by an officer, Daniel something. Pantaleo. And it took 5 years for the officer to get fired, even though the killing was on camera. We got a long way to go. So what's next? What can people do to become more actively engaged as concerned citizens?
Yeah, when we're starting to hear again about Eric Garner, when we're hearing about Mike Brown, when we're hearing about Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice, I mean, it's just amazing to me how these things can come full circle. Because we started the show talking about Abner Louima and Amadou Diallo and issues of police brutality, and then to see these things coming up again. And the ironic thing is that it's not as if things had just all of a sudden just stopped and then we're getting a flurry of it now. But to your point, the fact that now everyone has police cameras, people have cameras on their phones, people can see things that are happening. And I think a lot of times people would make these allegations or would actually state what happened to them. But a lot of folks would say, I don't know if that's true, or there may be some claim that they were resisting arrest, and people be like, I don't know, like
not from half the videos I saw,
right?
But kids getting shot in the back, running away.
But that's just it. Now that people can actually see the video, people are saying like, whoa, that didn't seem like resistance. That doesn't seem like excessive force. And I think what it is too, a lot of folks who may not have these type of experiences growing up, they're thinking to themselves like, I've had experiences. I've said a whole lot worse to an officer, or I had a friend who did something a lot worse, and they called our parents and were told to go home. They didn't have this same type of, evolution or de-evolution of events that have led to someone losing their life, or people, these, tragic uses of force of trying to dominate someone as opposed to being able to detain somebody. And
what can we do then?
Well, that's just it. I mean, I think the first thing is always about awareness. And I think that, between, social media nowadays and just people being more engaged, I think we're at that point. But I think the next step is trying to figure out like what things should we be holding our elected officials accountable for.
Take us to your favorite, musical influences, being a kid from Jamaica, Queens. And how has that evolved over time? And then maybe we'll get go into your wedding a little bit too, which was I had a chance to attend. It was really fun. So start with your music interests, Jason.
Oh man, I've always been a Nas guy. Like I could listen to Nas. I've listened to It Was Written in particular, probably about, I don't know. I don't even want to say 38. That was probably just in one summer. Like I remember we'd go out when we would be, doing chores or what have you. And just keep listening to the whole thing over and over again. And
what's the most underrated song on It Was Written?
It
Was Written is Nas's second album. It wasn't his greatest, but it was his second greatest.
Maybe. I guess that's up to a debate.
That's up to the debate. So which one was Black Girl Lost?
Black Girl Lost. Yeah. In fact, I think that'd probably be my favorite song. It kind of goes between that and Silent Murder and One Mic. But I think Black Girl Lost for the longest has been my favorite.
I grew up with there being Bengali grocery stores nearby, there being a Mexican butcher shop. Like there's so much cultural, what's the word? There's so much just cultural like diffusion, exposure going on that like I went to school with like so many different cultures, like the flags on our classroom doors. The whole door would be filled with all these flags and different backgrounds that people have. So I was always very used to having so many different colors. So personally for me, I feel like feminism is something that I always thought about. But it wasn't really until like my brother was born and we were growing up together that I really started thinking about it, and it really started rooting inside of me. Because I remember the way my brother was treated around the house versus me and my sister was very, very different.
Okay.
And I remember being very young, about like, I want to say 7 or 8, thinking like, wait, why are mom and dad asking him to help with these chores?
Okay.
Why isn't he having to do this? Safe spaces, because they are so necessary. You need a space where you can just come in, take a breather, and talk to other people. This is not just women, it's people of color, just all together minority groups are really fighting for these safe spaces, and I feel like they're very necessary.